Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the Parks Recreation Greenway Advisory Board meeting on this Thursday, June 16th, 2022. First, we have time for public comments. If there's anyone here, which I don't believe I see anyone from the public who would like to make any comments, this would be the time. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the report from the Raleigh Youth Council.
Carmen with a beautiful smile.
Hi, Carmen.
Good evening. Again, I'm Carmen Miles with the Raleigh Youth Council. I'm speaking on behalf of the teens. They are not here tonight. We currently are not in session, and so they are enjoying their summer vacation and working some summer jobs, a lot of them with the city of Raleigh. So we're very excited about that. We will return in September. Over the next few months, we will be planning, and we will report back out to you all in September with our plans for the 2022-2023 school year.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Hi, Christina Jones from the Parks Committee, and we are going to partner with you in October. And I know at the last Parks Committee meeting we were talking about coordinating with you, but if you guys are off for the summer, is there any way should we be contacting you specifically to see if there's any,
Yes.
just getting feedback on what we could do?
Absolutely. You can continue to reach out with me, and we can, I still have contact with the teams throughout the summer, so we will continue to plan for our events. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Very good. Next, we have a presentation from Emma Lyles on the pre-development assessment plans for 2 sites. Hi there.
Hello. So I got a couple sites for you guys tonight. We have the Forestville Road and Old Williams Road properties. These are currently undeveloped park properties, and I'm going to go over our pre-development assessment plans that we've conducted for the 2 sites. So here's a kind of nice diagram over the overall process. So we start with our preliminary research. We compile some context analysis, site analysis. We reach out to the State Historic Preservation Office and the NC Heritage Program. And then afterwards, we conduct a few site visits. It's myself, and then Sean Goff, who's our natural resources manager, and then we've got Doug Porter, who represents our cultural resources. We kind of do an inventory for both of those natural resources and cultural resources on site, and then we work to put the document together. We will sometimes do a preliminary nature preserve assessment, which we did not conduct for these 2 sites, but we do do a site suitability analysis and develop some interim management recommendations. Then you can see on the timeline, that's when we come to y'all and get you guys to sign off. And then the PDAPs move into our short-term management. We kind of do those short-term interim management recommendations. A lot of it's usually monitoring, mapping, invasive species control. Sometimes we do a more in-depth nature preserve criteria evaluation. And then we'll update the document with all of that and then move into more of our long-term management and update again. These are just living documents, so they get updated as more information comes along. And then this is kind of cut off at the end, but at the end of a PDAP process, it moves to site master planning. And so here's everything that is included in a PDAP. Like I said, we got the context analysis, site analysis, natural resource inventory, cultural resource inventory. I won't go through every single one of these maps and stuff. And then we have a park access, social equity, and demographic analysis section. And then the documents are wrapped up with that site suitability and interim management recommendations. So to kick off tonight, we're going to do the Forestville Road property. So here's kind of a context map with nearby parks. So Forestville Road property is at 4913 Forestville Road. It's very near the edge of Raleigh's extraterritorial jurisdiction, all the way to the east. It's east of I-540, but kind of south of US 401. The only nearby park properties are going to be 2 other undeveloped park properties, which is going to be that old Watkins property in Hodge Mill Creek. Every developed park that's nearby is kind of on the other side of the Neuse River, so a little hard to get to. Here we got an aerial of the site. So it's a little tricky to see, but there is a road that runs along that northern boundary. It's kind of Oak Hill Drive, that's what it's called. It's not in the best shape. The whole overall site is about 25 acres. There's currently no utilities on site and no Greenway corridors or easements on site either. Here we have some lovely site photographs. So the whole site is kind of gently to moderately sloping topography, kind of mixed pine and hardwood forests. There's some regenerating old fields, and maybe some other natural communities and habitat types yet to be identified. There's kind of a significant hydrological feature that kind of runs north-south through the middle of the site. You can kind of see in pictures 2 and 3 are those creek. And picture 7 is where that creek goes underneath Oak Hill Drive. It's kind of making it not a very stable road anymore, and there's some big holes. No one fell in, don't worry. It's a close call. Picture number 1, though, is kind of the most of interest picture, I think. It's going to be the existing log cabin on site. So this site is super, has a lot of cultural resources on site, which I'll get into more on this next slide here. So the property we have today, that 25 acres, is only a small portion of what once was approximately a 600-acre plantation originally owned by Kearney Upchurch. I have a lot of notes here about how he passed it on to his son, and then to his son, and after Ivan Upchurch's death in 1964, the land holdings were subdivided. This is then the property that is what we're calling Forestville Road was conveyed to Haley Upchurch Montauk, and then we came into possession of the property in 2004. So there's several structures that used to exist on site. There's a tennis structure that was apparently a popular attraction for visitors, or tennis courts. There was a 2-story cotton gin, but all that is left now is a red-painted workshop that was probably constructed in the mid-1960s, so it's not super historically relevant. Same with the playhouse that's there, and the stable is also kind of from around that time too, but the log cabin has been there for quite a while and is believed to be a former enslaved person's dwelling. And there's some information we've got from the Works Progress Administration in the 1930s, an interview with Georgiana Foster, where she talks about the log houses that they used to live in on site. It was moved, though, in the 1950s, so just to a different part of the property, and the chimney was added on later. But it's a really, cute house. If I recommend going to see it, I like it. We got to go inside, and we had a little key. It was, there were some paintings. It's kind of, I don't know, I liked it. And so here's the site suitability analysis. For site suitability analysis for the PDAPs, we kind of break everything into 3 different designations, either very limited, limited, or regular development. And so for this site, we designated the very limited areas as where those historic structures are on site. So right here is where the workshop was and the playhouse, and then here is where the log cabin is now, and right next to it is that stable. And so I just kind of put a little buffer around each of them, and interim management recommends kind of assessing that later, which I'll get into on another slide. There were several steep slopes on the site, though, kind of along those creeks and the tributaries, and so those were designated as very limited. We say in the PDAP that those areas that are not super suitable for development unless they're low impact uses, such as natural surface trails, historic education, interpretive signage, invasive removal, those sort of things. And then we've got limited development on site, kind of designated that those riparian buffers along the creek beds, and then also along Oak Hill Drive, we designated as limited development until it either gets repaired or one of the interim management recommendations, which I'll get to, is assessing if that road still even needs to be a part of the site anymore. But as you can see, most of the site is suitable for regular development, no significant or special limitations on development, open to most design choices. And so we've broken the interim management recommendations into 2 sections. Usually the PDAPs only have natural resource interim management recommendations, but since this is such a unique site, we also have historic resources. So these natural resources ones, you'll see they're pretty similar to most of our plans, doing some additional monitoring and mapping of biological inventories, identifying those unauthorized any access or use, identifying potential threats to natural resources on site, working on those invasive plant species controls. And then this one is unique. We wanted to evaluate the access points and access road because it is dangerous on Oak Hill Drive. So want to look into that further. And then our long-term goals, we've got continued collection of data, additional monitoring and mapping, more retention and protection of documented significant plant and animal species, and improvement of the habitat and plant communities as well. Our cultural resource goals, short-term, we've got developing an interim protection plan for the structures on site and evaluate the significance of the existing structures and landscape and define a preferred path towards related to those findings, and to document the original location of the log cabin and conduct further research into its history. Our long-term is define a plan for ongoing historic preservation of the log cabin and possibly additional structures and elements pending evaluation, identifying those interpretive opportunities and scope, and to conduct archaeological work in the log cabin's original location if determined to be within the city property. And it holds potential for greater understanding of the site and specifically antebellum African American history in Raleigh. And so if you guys want to pause for any questions specifically about that one, sure.
A couple of curiosity questions. How did we come into possession of that, number one?
That is a great question. I can find out more information for you and follow up at a later point.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And related to that, I read both of these PDAPs, and thank you for all the interesting information. And I was wondering if you could make it a part of the PDAP to have a little, how this property was acquired, and so that as we read through it, we already know the answer to that question.
Yeah, definitely.
It does seem to be a question every time you present.
It sure does, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think what prompted the question on my end was, like sometimes I know that parks are given to us, or properties are given to us, I should say, and we kind of, as a city, have to decide what to do with it. And I was looking on iMaps. It doesn't seem contiguous to anything else that the city owns, from what I understand, correct? It's just sort of
Yeah, no, it's kind of
a pretty piece of land. Okay, yeah.
We do get those properties brought to us, our attention. We'll have an assessment, and we do look at it, not only its proximity, but in the opportunity, is it have a unique feature, and where's growth patterns? We occasionally will try to land bank because we know that the community is growing, so it's always easier to get that property earlier than later. Some of the parks that you're seeing now, Marsh Creek and others, were actually land banked for probably 15 or 20 years before Raleigh grew into it.
That
So
makes
it's part
sense.
of an assessment.
That makes sense, yeah.
Emma, I have a comment, I guess, about the graphic you showed that showed where to develop and where not to.
Yeah,
I
the
forget
site
the terms
suitability.
used.
I can go
Yeah.
back to it.
There it is. Very limited development. So the very limited development around where the existing structures are, I imagine as you continue to study those structures, they may go away, right? As we determine it's a 1960s building with no historical significance and it
Yes.
can be gotten rid of. Okay. So you said this is a living document, so that would just be updated?
Yes.
Is that how that works? Okay.
I think in one of the short-term goals, we've got the evaluate the cultural and historic significance of the existing structures. And so I think as we work towards that, we can kind of refine the site suitability analysis to reflect outcomes from that.
And how is that determined? Is that just an internal staff decision on whether it is suitable to keep, or?
That is a question I can pass along to Doug Porter and get back to you on.
Okay, sure.
Thanks.
I've got one more question.
Cool.
Where's the little map with your colors on it? I do well with the visual. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So you get the red, the yellow, and the green. When you say development, obviously I can understand very limited, and regular. But what does that mean within the scope of this? Is regular development, we can put playgrounds and Ferris wheels, or not Ferris wheels, but you get it. Or is it sort of within, is there a purview of how that's defined, regular development?
So I think how we define regular development is just it's suitable, where do I have it? no significant or special limitations on development, and open to most design choices that'll facilitate a versatile park property is our definition for regular development.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then, as Emma showed in her graphic about the process, so when this is pre-master plan process, right?
Yes,
So
right.
this then would come forward to guide the master plan.
Yeah.
And then that would be, those unique areas or developable areas would then be considered during that master planning process with
Got
the
it.
community. And
Got it.
that would then guide what may be appropriate based on what those community needs and interests are.
That's neat. Okay, thank you.
I had a question. Is there any, kind of random, is there any connection between the Upchurch family that used to own this and the Upchurch that the building that we're in right now is named after?
Oh, I had not put that together.
That one you will have to.
You get extra,
Historic
that's
resource.
Yeah, that
extra
is.
points right there.
Yeah.
I will pass that along to Doug and get back to you.
He had a gas station, just FYI. Nicest mayor we ever.
All right, we'll go on to Old Williams, if you guys are ready. So it's a little hard to see, but it's this little purple dot right here. So Old Williams is at 3800 Rock Quarry Road, just inside kind of the southern boundary of Raleigh's ETJ, south of I-40, south of I-87. The closest parks are going to be Walnut Creek South and Walnut Creek Athletic Complex. So the Old Williams site in of itself is only 5 acres, and we came into possession of the property in 2013, but there are several adjacent Greenway easements along some adjacent corridors that were also evaluated within this document. So those corridors are the Walnut Creek, Big Branch Creek Tributary B, Walnut Creek, Big Branch Creek Branch number 1, and Walnut Creek, Big Branch Creek Branch number 2. So there's 3 corridors that kind of all converge here, and we've got a lot of easements around it. I'm just going to see if I had the acreage for all of those real quick. I think it's about 50 acres with all the Greenway easements, even though the one actual parcel is only 5 acres. Here's some site photos. So as you can see, only 5, 6, and 7 are actually on site, but once you kind of get into those Greenway easement areas where it's more wetland, you get these more prettier pictures like number 2 and number 3.
Wow.
So the actual site itself seems to be former agricultural fields that have regenerated into homogeneous pine-dominated forested stand with moderately dense hardwood shrub mid-story and little vegetative diversity in the understory. The neighboring Greenway easement parcels include nearly 52 acres of Piedmont alluvial forest dominated by a hardwood forest canopy and increased vegetative diversity in the mid-story and understory. So a lot of more natural resources in those Greenway easement areas. The easement parcels possess the greatest potential for supporting significant and/or rare plants, wildlife, and natural communities due to the hydrological influences, soil types, and lack of prolonged agricultural land use in the past. A big thing to keep in mind, though, with the Old Williams site is that it is directly adjacent here in this brown to a public utilities debris drying site. So a little information about that is so they have debris drying beds on site. So this is used for any debris, such as flushable wipes that are found in a sewer main that are too wet to then be put into a landfill. So they have to vacuum that debris out into a truck and then drive it here and let it to dry before they can then put it in the landfill. Access to the site is not permitted to the public, so that is reflected in the site suitability analysis, kind of a little buffer. And there's already been some talk from the neighbors about how they do not like those trucks driving through their neighborhood. And so just to keep, so just to keep that in mind, I think, when thinking about design of the site is trying to not infuriate those neighbors more. Did you have a question?
You're talking about this site that's
This big guy.
Yeah, okay. So, just a quick question. Is the debris drying site, are there odors and things like that, or is it?
In the site visits I was there at,
Yeah.
it wasn't very strong or overpowering, but I was maybe there on a good day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can't imagine it's very fun
Okay.
most of the time.
And is that adjacent to 40?
Yes.
Keep your windows up as you drive right through there.
So here we've got the site suitability analysis for Old Williams. So the 5-acre park parcel itself is relatively flat, well drained, and has very few development constraints. The site is well integrated into the surrounding neighborhood and is an ideal candidate for future neighborhood park development. The surrounding Greenway easements include substantial wetland acreage, so future development of greenway trails, natural surface trails, and/or boardwalks can improve public access to these areas and provide connectivity to the Walnut Creek Greenway Trail. And so the very limited areas that you're going to see on here, there is an existing sewer easement. And so that's going to be kind of right here and kind of along here is that sewer easement. And then this very limited is just kind of to create a little buffer around that debris drying site. There's a pond over here to stay out of as well. And then the limited development, it does show like most of the Greenway easement areas, but that's where the wetlands are. This is where the 100-year floodplain is. And so to kind of not very limited development, but just not regular development. So right in that sweet spot of limited is what is recommended for these Greenway easements. But the site itself, that 5-acre parcel, is mostly ready for regular development. You got a little bit of the 100-year floodplain in the southwest corner, and then in that northwest corner, it's limited development because there are a couple of electric lines going through, which I struggled to find information on. And so I think that's just going to be part of updating this document, is doing a deeper dive into those utilities and then updating the document about it. And so here's our interim management plan. So these are, again, just the natural resources interim management recommendations since there were no cultural resources on site. So we've got that short-term goal of additional monitoring and mapping, kind of building up those biological inventories, identifying any unauthorized access and use, identifying potential threats to the natural resources on site, and then always working to kind of evaluate and control those invasive plants. And then our long-term goals, more collection, more monitoring, mapping, especially on the Greenway easement parcels, retention and protection of documented significant plant and animal species, and improvement of wildlife habitat and natural plant communities. And so we've got our next steps. We'll be back in October with a couple more. We're going to work on updating some PDAPs this winter, and then we'll do some more site visits in the spring and be back here next summer. But I can backtrack if you guys want to talk about Old Williams anymore. I can pull up the site stability.
That aerial photograph that you showed in the beginning of this presentation looks like there's not a lot of trees in that intensely developed area. Lots of built surfaces and paved streets. Does any of these neighborhoods have community gathering places, whether a community pool or a
any
clubhouse?
HOA properties, you mean?
Pardon?
Like any HOA properties?
Yes, exactly.
So I am not sure, but I can definitely look into that and get back to you. I know there were definitely some HOAs and neighborhood associations in the area, and there's a map in the PDAP that shows those. But it's kind of hard to keep an inventory of those things on our part.
Well, it looks like that's a mighty small parcel for a park, given how much development there is, how many residential units there are in close proximity. It looks like a place that could use a park. I was just wondering, from me as a tree lover, I'm thinking, sure could use some big trees for the children growing up in that area.
For sure. Yeah, I don't think there's much nearby. You can kind of see it's just Walnut Creek South, which doesn't really provide park experiences. And so you got Sanderford Road and the Walnut Creek Athletic Complex in Worthdale and Barwell. This is that 2-mile buffer, and that's all that's in that, And there is definitely a park access section in the PDAP for this site as well. I just can't quite remember it off the top of my head, but I would bet it's not good.
When you come back after doing you said you're going to revisit some of the PDAPs,
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be really interesting. It's hard for us to keep in scope where all these different potential places are. And so if we could have a map that showed all of the different PDAPs you were working on, it would give some context to the.
Does that exist?
There is not a map that shows all of them, but I can easily make that and share that with y'all.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
That would be helpful.
Unless it's like, I mean, I don't know how
Yeah.
many there are. Is it?
Well, I think we did 5 or 6 last year, have 4
Okay,
or 6 left
Great.
to do. So, yeah. I mean, it's definitely not all of our undeveloped park properties that we're doing the PDAPs for right now.
Right. Okay.
So I had one brief question about access. I know you said it's mentioned in the PDAP, so I can check it out further in there. But could you just speak briefly on generally how you're envisioning access for this? Is it mostly going to be foot traffic from the neighborhood and the Greenway? It's obviously the park parcel itself, relatively small. I imagine you don't want to put a ton of parking or anything like that on there. Will there be, bike racks, that sort of thing? Just if you could speak briefly on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, PDAPs try not to be prescriptive. Kind of leave that up to the master planning process, but I would think that you'd want to keep in mind the access that's already happening to the debris drying site, kind of stay away from that. But, you can see from the aerial, it's, I wouldn't even expect street parking to really be an option, so maybe someone above my pay grade could speak to that.
So I think to Emma's point, when we get to that master plan process, we, and the development, working with the community, we would provide focus on access that's appropriate for the scale of the space and whatever code may require based on what we put in. So that would be.
Doesn't require anything anymore.
Yeah, so which may not be much anymore, but yeah. In this case, if it looks like we have sidewalks, that's a great way to have a connection, for that community. That would be
To access the Greenway.
part of, and that would all be part of that process in the master plan.
Okay, thank you.
Emma, with the Greenway easement that you show here, does that connect to the overall system somehow, this little segment that you're showing?
Yeah, so I think the easements continue in both directions.
So that would be some sort of a connector to the overall Walnut Creek section of the Greenway? Okay, interesting. Thanks. Does anyone else have any other questions for Emma? Okay. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, guys.
Okay, up next we have a presentation on Devereaux Meadow Park from Gary Claiborne.
All right, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good to see everybody in person. So I'm Gary Claiborne. I'm Capital Projects Manager with Raleigh Parks. So tonight I am here to give a update on the concept plan, as well to go over the project renaming process that we are now currently initiating. Last time we discussed this project with you all was virtually back in January. So since that time, we have gone through a second public engagement process where we presented the draft concept plan to the public. And now we are at the point where we do have a recommended final concept plan, which we will bring back to you next month in more detail. And we also have a project phasing and funding plan in place. And this project is currently allocated in the parks bond in the amount of $11.5 million. So, as I know there are a few newer members on the board, I do want to give a little bit more in-depth background on the concept plan than maybe I normally would have. So I am going to go give an overview of the project and go over the project scope, schedule, the concept plan development, project funding, and then, as I mentioned, the park renaming process. And just a reminder for this meeting, it's anticipated that for you all to receive this concept plan is informational only at this time, and there's no formal action required at this meeting. So the project scope is for a 14-acre city-owned parcel that's now a maintenance yard for the city of Raleigh. It's at the corner of Capitol and Peace Street. To develop this as a future public park. The scope involves site remediation, the development of a natural and passive park, restoration of the Pigeon House Branch, which is a stream that flows along the western side of the property, which is the left side of this aerial photograph, and to also initiate the first phase of a future Pigeon House Branch Greenway trail. So for this project, it has been active in terms of an actual project for us since 2017. It's divided into 3 stages. Stage 1, which went from 2017 to 2020, mostly involved environmental site analysis and constraints assessment, as well as some other environmental studies to the site and to the existing city office building that's on the site. Stage 2, which is what we're in now, initiated in 2020, and it really centers around the conceptual and schematic design process of it. We are at that conceptual design phase right now, near the end of that. Stage 2 also involved additional remedial investigations, as well as our public and stakeholder engagement. Stage 3, which will take place after schematic design, if everything does move forward with this, it will involve additional remedial investigation, and then site remediation of the site itself, because there is environmental contamination there. Then going into the design, development, construction documents, permitting, contract bidding, and then construction. So our first public engagement on this project was last year. Our design team prepared 3 different design alternatives for this. We presented that to the public, mostly in a virtual format, just due to the pandemic at that time. Out of those 3 designs, concept number 3 was the one that was generally preferred by most people. It does involve the passive park nature, the restoration of the Pigeon House Branch, as well as the realignment of that streamway, and constructed wetlands and some other site features as well. So after we determined that concept number 3 was the one that we wanted to bring forward to be a concept design, we went back to the design team and came up with a design vision. And that concept design vision is defined by the restoration, daylighting, and meandering of the Pigeon House Branch that creates different programmatic environmental niches throughout the site. The design offers an escape to nature within the city, celebration of water in our native plant communities, diversity of experiences from social gathering spaces to places for individual reflection, and interpretive site elements that honor the site and the surrounding areas past. So what you see before you is actually one of the boards that was presented at the open house that we had this past February. We had that at the Halifax Park Community Center. Had a wonderful day where we had it outside, and it was in the low 80s at that time, which was we planned it just right for that. So we had fairly good participation. We had about 80 people show up for that. And we were just able to kind of like informally discuss with people what the concept design was at that time. We followed that up with a publicinput.com survey that we had up for 6 weeks. We accompanied that survey with an actual video presentation of the entire concept plan, so people who weren't able to attend the open house got a good full understanding of the project before they were able to take the survey. All told, by the end of that public engagement process, which ended in mid-March, the emails that we received combined with the survey results, we had about 600 participants. So we got a pretty good showing for that as well, which pretty much replicated what we got back last year as well. So again, here's just some pictures of the actual open house that we had back then, as well as some of the advertisements we had. And some screenshots from the online survey. We did have hard copy surveys as well. To be honest with you, we didn't receive too many of those back. I think people are generally using the online format, which is pretty good for us. So right now, as I mentioned, we received generally favorable responses from that public engagement. And with that, as I mentioned, we are at the point now where we have the draft final concept plan. Really didn't have to change too much from the public engagement process. But if you were to compare this particular concept plan to the original alternative 3, which we had from last year, there are a few differences where we did have to, between the time that the alternatives were developed and the time that we developed this concept plan, we did do some additional, our design team did do some additional remedial investigations, and we realized that we had to kind of treat the stream a little bit differently. The realignment of the stream mostly occurs in the southern portion of the site. And then, so that's the new realignment right there. And then the existing alignment along the northern part of the site pretty much follows the existing alignment, but still restoring the creek within its existing channel. And you can see one of the renderings that our design team came up with for the area around the constructed wetlands. So just kind of going over the major elements of the concept plan itself, we have the major Greenway path going north to south. I already pointed out the realigned stream. We have secondary and tertiary paths throughout the site, including a proposed history walk that kind of lines up with a portion of the old baseball stadium, which used to be here. And then we also have a series of berms along Capitol Boulevard as well. And then we have a series of constructed wetlands in this area. And then we have 2 plazas, one in the central portion of the site and another in the southern portion of the site. So this is the full concept plan as has been developed. Here's a few site sections throughout the site. One thing I do want to point out, I probably should have pointed this out before, we do have a concept plan report right now, and we can, we do plan on giving that to you all for your review prior to next month's meeting. So one of the other things that we had to do as part of the overall bond process is that City Council specifically recommended that we look at how we can reduce the cost for this project, because the draft concept plan, which I previously presented as mentioned in the memo that was prepared, the cost for this is around $18 million to fully construct. So as part of some of the reductions that were requested by council for several of the projects within the bonds, we did take a look at how we can reduce cost. And so we went back to the design team and we took 2 approaches. We said, okay, what happens if we rescope this project, kind of like completely change the parameters, and what does that do to potentially change the cost? And then we also looked at phasing plans. But one of the things, the 4 bullet points that you see there are the 4 things that we wanted to be sure we kept in mind for every single one of these particular options we developed. Site remediation. There is environmental contamination on site, so we do have to address that. We do want to continue with a passive park design. The Greenway is very important, and we want to provide full pedestrian access to the entire site. So without going into any detail from each of those, what was decided was to go with a phased approach, which basically we are looking at the full concept plan as originally developed and say, how can we phase this into a phase 1 type of project so that in the future we can still create all the other park elements. So what you see here on the left side, that is the full concept plan. We have an alternative 1 and an alternative 2 to what we are calling our option B phased approach. So the major elements that we are still including in here, as kind of mentioned before, the stream restoration, the stream realignment, the Greenway path, which is shown in the orange, the berms, which are actually not just there to buffer Capitol Boulevard, but it's also part of the grading of the stream itself. So there's soil that we can use for that berming, and then providing pedestrian access. So what this does is allows us, if we do go forward with this particular reduced phased option, we can do all the other elements within the full concept design in future phases. There's no restrictions on that. So in doing this, this reduces the project cost down to $13.5 million to do this. Within the bond, we have $11.5 million, so we are looking at approximately $2 million of other opportunities to help fund to reach that $13.5 million. Excuse me. So council recommendations is kind of lined out there. To go with the bond reduction budget to $11.5 million, the phased option B approach, and then the project renaming, which I will get to next.
So Gary,
Yes.
so does this mean that essentially the phasing just means that the plazas are not in the beginning? Is that
correct.
really? Okay.
That is correct.
So we've got
yeah.
the Greenway Trail, we've got the restored stream, and it's just
And
some
we
of those
have
built elements.
We have reduced landscaping too. I forgot to mention that. If you
Okay.
look at the plan on the left, you see lots of circles there, which are meant to represent diagrammatically lots of trees and such as that. This plan, because of, again, the reduced cost, we would have to look at more of a maybe meadow type of landscapes. Trees here and there, but not the more intensely landscaped areas that we had originally proposed.
Right,
So.
okay. And before you get away from the plan, I had one question about one of the elements, the stone aqueduct retrofit. What does that mean? So that would stay there, the stone channel,
Yes.
but not have water in it, or?
So there is I'm going
Relic?
to point out this magenta line right there. That is an area of the existing stream which was put underground, put into a tunnel when they built the baseball stadium back here in the 40s. So it was under a bleacher section, essentially. It's still underground, remains underground. And we do see opportunity in part of the historic interpretation of the site in the future phase is to actually have a walk along that area, and then also to use that area as a bioretention area as well. So we essentially take the top off of that channel and still allow water to be there. So it becomes kind of a feature representing the history of the site.
Okay.
So
in the phase version, it would just remain covered, stone channel? We're not sure.
that is
obviously.
still, that level of detail probably has not been
Yeah.
determined at this time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thanks.
Obviously, we will divert the flow out of it somehow, but whether that is completely removed or not is a level of detail
Right,
to come
sure.
later.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yes.
Hi. Can you touch on a little bit, going back to the public engagement portion, what were some of the concerns that were brought up by people who attended these meetings?
At the meetings themselves, there weren't that many concerns expressed. One of the concerns that people did come up with, particularly from emails and such, and a few other sources, people were concerned about the fact that there's no parking right now in the current plans. So I can go into detail about the parking issue if you want, but that was the major probably negative comments, and it did come from a very small minority of the respondees. So
Right, because that's the concern that I've heard about this, and the questions that I've received. And yes, parking, but more accessibility was the term that I've heard in the past. Now, knowing that it's right in the center of downtown, how do people who are not living right there in those beautiful apartments, how do people access this?
well, they still will be able to access well, it's actually kind of a little bit off the screen right here because the words at the bottom are blocking it. The Peace Street exit, Peace Street entrance, which is right at the southern entrance, that will be completely accessible way to get into the site from the street in terms of that. Then we also have in this phase version, we also have an entrance at the north at Dort Street, and then there'll also be a connection to the sidewalk along Capitol Boulevard as well. So,
Okay.
so in terms of accessing the site, it would be fully accessible. So, and it's a flat site, so we're not dealing with dramatic grade changes or anything like that either. So,
Thank you.
I wonder if that little east-west connector, is that the street that's existing, where the arrow is as access between the berms?
this right here.
Yes.
That is the sidewalk off Capitol Boulevard.
Okay, it's a sidewalk. It's not that existing street that cuts through.
No,
that
no,
goes
no, no,
away.
that's not,
Okay.
no.
Okay. I was going to say, I wonder if that could be like handicap parking, just right there along the street, if it was still there, but.
I do think that that's something that's the level of detail and decisions will need to be made about whether we would put accessible parking spaces in a area that's at least, maybe not within the park itself, but working with other folks within the city to determine if we can put some
Some
accessible
nearby.
lots along West Street possibly.
Right, because
So-
I think to Christina's point, able-bodied folks can bicycle and walk in, but for other people, it might be challenging.
Right. One, I think just looking at this from a big picture, and we've discussed this before, is that, this essentially, this area, even though it's maybe out of downtown now, in the future, downtown's expanding in that direction. And I guess you would think of Moore Square. Don't have dedicated parking for that necessarily. You can think of other bigger cities where they have centralized parks within their downtown areas. They don't have dedicated parking to that either. So that's how we're looking at this. This is a future park. This is on down the road before it gets constructed, and so there would be more development occurring, particularly along West Street.
Yep,
So.
understood. Thank you. Yep.
I have two questions.
Yes.
You mentioned remediation, and that's a concern that I've actually had. You also mentioned environmental contamination and then reduction of cost. So scrolling back to where there was cost reduction and that mentioned remediation on slide 12. Does that mean less cleanup?
No, it's absolutely the same amount of cleanup that would occur.
What kind of existing risks are there right now? Like, we don't want to have it be halfway done or even just not done enough, and then our kids and our dogs get cancer or something. Like, how toxic is this?
All of the contamination that we know of at this time is underground and many feet underground,
So that could-
soil and groundwater contamination. Some of it is attributed to the fact that this was a maintenance yard for many years, and there's a fueling facility there. There's underground storage tanks, okay? And so there's that level of contamination that occurs naturally with that. The Speedway, which is across the street on across Capitol Boulevard from the site, they had a documented leak many years ago.
I didn't know there was a
And they
speedway.
actually have their own testing wells on the site monitoring the situation, and so it's an understood situation.
Speedway Gas Station, not a Speedway.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
I'm
I didn't know there was a speedway near there.
Speedway is Capitol Boulevard.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
Some
I mean,
people
that's
think
what.
that's the
Okay.
Speedway.
You're
Yeah.
referring to the gas station. I know about Capitol Boulevard.
My apologies.
Okay.
Sorry about that. There's also on the other side of P Street, south of the site, there was also a former dry cleaning site as well, and there's potential plume of contaminants that has come down. It's commonly understood there's an existing underground sewer line that goes north to south, and it may be traveling along that. So everything is well underground in terms of there's no environmental risk to somebody going on the site right now, unless
Okay.
they start digging. Where we will be digging in the site is where the stream restoration is going to occur, and it's not going to be quite as deep as maybe you would think it's going to be in terms of the amount of going down into that level. But it's known, we know where it is. There's going to be more testing to figure out the exact extent of it. There will be remediation put into place, and I apologize, nobody from the design team is here tonight, so they could probably address it a lot better, but they are talking about putting in features within the stream bed itself that will actually absorb some of that contamination to avoid the contamination going into the stream channel itself and going downstream.
That's good.
So there's several things that are being looked at right
Okay.
now in terms of dealing with it, and at this point, there's no perceived harm to the public in any of these design scenarios that we have.
That's good to hear. I have one other question. I enjoyed talking with the Tetra Tech guys because I worked with Tetra Tech guys in Zambia when I worked on foreign aid for the U.S. government. But I heard that there was this is in the rumor mill. Is there a connection with this park to John Kane Construction and Development, or is that just rumor mill?
That's very much
Rumor mill.
rumor mill. Yes.
Okay.
So yes.
Thank you for clarifying.
No, I will say we do have a stakeholder committee as part of this, as part of our public engagement process. And we do have a representative from Kane Development, but we also have representatives from other companies as well as community members who are in that stakeholders as well. So, but they are in, I think there may have been some information out there which is incorrect, that they are funding the project, and that is in no way, shape, or form the case. So,
Thank you.
other questions on the park design?
Probably the only other question I've thought about is, I know that what's there right now is not particularly attractive, right? It's a little bit of an eyesore coming down, and I know that city council and the city as a whole would love to see it prettier. Does the phase development, and even looking at the first phase versus the full phase, do we still feel like it's going to accomplish what we're hoping for, which is just sort of an aesthetic improvement?
I think you can tell from here it's going to be a major improvement. We're getting rid of all that pavement.
Which is
All that
lovely.
pavement. There's a couple of buildings that are still there that are actually still used by our staff. Those will be removed. You can just imagine turning gray to green. I think that's enough right there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, good.
If there's any other questions, we can kind of look back that to the end. But in terms of the concept plan approval process, so here we are at June right now. I'm presenting an update. As mentioned, we do have a design report that we will be giving to you all prior to next month's meeting, and that will be more of a involved presentation at that time, where I'll go over some more details in terms of the plan itself. And then we're looking after the late summer break, coming back in September and requesting an action on the final concept plan. And then I think we're looking towards after the election to bring that to City Council for their final approval of the concept plan. I didn't mean to have these animations in here. So getting to the renaming of the property. We have heard from many community members throughout this process that there are concerns with the use of the name Devereaux within the project. So just kind of want to give a little bit of history in terms of the site name. So the original site name is understood to date back to when this site was part of a much larger plantation owned by the John Devereaux Jr. family, who was also associated with the Mordecai family as well. We understand that the common name referred to this plantation was actually Will's Forest. So John Devereaux, in addition to owning this plantation, they also owned other plantations in eastern North Carolina as well, which all obviously held enslaved persons. So, and John Devereaux was also an officer in the Confederacy as well. So following the Civil War, the family still held on to the property for approximately another 30 years or so. And it was the parcel that is now our project site, was sold off and essentially sold to the city at that time in the late 1890s. It was pretty much at that time that we start to see newspaper articles at that time referring to the site, because it was used as a place for public gatherings. It was essentially a public park. Some of the terms used for that site were Devereaux Grove, Devereaux Meadow, Devereaux Playground, kind of like all interchanged terms used for like the next 30 years in different magazine articles. And then come the 1940s, the development of the Devereaux Meadow baseball stadium, which is an aerial photograph you see. I think that was taken in the 1950s of that. It was a minor league baseball stadium, and the most popular, well, the most well-known team from that time are the Raleigh Capitals, even though there were several other teams that played there during the time. The baseball stadium remained in operation until the early 1970s. And essentially the teams went out of business, and then the baseball stadium was demolished in the late 1970s. And even when it was a baseball stadium, the northern part of the site, north of the baseball stadium, was still a maintenance facility for the city. When the baseball stadium was demoed, we got full use of the entire site for our maintenance folks.
Can I ask you when it was? Didn't Broughton use it as a football?
Yes.
Somewhere in there, in the 70s.
So it had been used. It had been used by local schools for football.
Okay.
Yep.
I've had lots of friends tell me about that, so I didn't get that.
Oh yeah. Many schools used it for their athletics as well as church. There's notations of churches using it for gathering areas after church and such. So, yeah. So in terms of the project renaming itself, because I think I've explained some of the issues with the name. Going back to the survey that we had back in February, we did have a question at the end of the survey where we kind of explained that we know that people are concerned about the name of the park, and we had a specific question that says, if you have any thoughts for a new name for this future park, we would like to hear your ideas from you. And we just had an open-ended comment section, and these are pretty much the main list of names that we received. So we did receive a few other names that we don't want to put on here, so you can imagine. So, and we did have a few people. I just want to note that we did have several people who, approximately 15% of respondees who requested for the name to remain Devereaux Meadow. So, in terms of the project naming considerations, we do have a resolution for the naming of parks, and I kind of want to get to that. It's kind of detailed in your memo a little bit more, but the Parks Board is encouraged to use names based upon geographical, historical, or ecological features indigenous to the park or the park area. So here's just some examples of some of the historic and ecological features of the site. So internally, staff kind of met. We looked at the examples that were presented from the survey results, and we have 4 naming suggestions right now: Pigeon House Meadow Park, Pigeon House Branch Park, Capitol Meadow Park, and Capitol Gateway Park. And there was a question that came in via email to Scott Payne either yesterday or early this morning, asking about the name Pigeon House for the creek itself. So kind of bear with me for a little bit, and I'll kind of show you some slides of where, maybe of where the name Pigeon House came from, as well as its drainage area. So here's a map of downtown Raleigh. Pigeon House Branch, that's its drainage area in relation to everything else. It does drain essentially from the village shopping area to Crabtree Creek. And here's an image that shows the both underground stormwater lines, which are shown in red, as well as the blue lines, which show a daylighted stream channel. So this area right here is the village shopping district, and we start to see, coming from that point, basically draining from the parking lot itself, Edna Metz Wells Park, we start to see the kind of like the first water that we actually see of Pigeon House Branch going through several of our parks. And then eventually flowing from there, going between houses, between West Johnson and Park Street, flowing across, going past Glenwood Avenue, going past West Street, just south of the Smoky Hollow development. It takes a sharp northerly direction turn and then goes into our project site right here. So that is the essentially the headwaters of the Pigeon House Branch.
Do we know anything about how it was named Pigeon House?
Right, that's
We,
what I was wondering.
yes,
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
we'll get to-
Wait for it.
Wait.
So flowing again from our project site, which is here, it continues to flow pretty much daylighted towards the north and weaves in between Capitol Boulevard. You can't really see it here. I'm going to highlight it here a little bit. Kind of weaves around Capitol Boulevard, then eventually comes out and hits Crabtree Creek. So that's the extent of Pigeon House Branch itself. In terms of the name itself, we did reach out to some of our historic resources folks today to kind of like do some quick research. Two hypotheses that have kind of come out just from the past few hours are that it's probably actually named after pigeons. So one thing we can look at without, I don't want to go into too many details, but the passenger pigeon, which is a species of pigeon that was indigenous to the eastern United States, went extinct about 100 years ago. They were fairly common here in North Carolina. In fact, it was a wintering habitat for many of them, and there are stories of European travelers coming here and seeing thousands of them, up in a tree. So that was probably one of the most prolific bird species in North Carolina for a while. The other one, which may be a little more relevant, I'm thinking to the name Pigeon House, is that there's historical records to indicate that there literally was a pigeon house somewhere near here. And if you actually look up pigeon cote, this is just for your, go to Wikipedia later tonight. And I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it right. It's C-O-T-E, yes. And it's also called dovecote. They are examples of these structures all over the world where this is where they house pigeons. So there's actually records of even someone in the Mordecai family referencing back in the mid 1850s to a pigeon house being near this area. So
Are we talking
that's
like-
the inference, is that's probably how it's got its name.
Is
So.
this something that is constructed for pigeons, or is okay?
Yes,
It's
literally.
not somebody who says, "I'm going to let pigeons live in my house."
No. Go
Okay.
tonight. Look it up on
Okay.
Wikipedia, and you'll
Okay.
see, particularly in Europe, you'll see some very extravagant
Fascinating.
architectural features.
not.
So this was probably a simpler structure here.
Wow.
So that's what we have come up with, and so I think we can hopefully say with some degree of confidence that we wouldn't have the concerns like we would have with the name Devereaux. So,
Gary, sorry. I know you said the list that you showed wasn't exhaustive, but I was curious, did anybody suggest names of baseball players that played here? I know you showed on one of those that Jackie Robinson played, and I think Hank Greenberg played here too, and just considering that they're both kind of civil rights icons, I don't know if people came up with that.
We did not have any actual player names. I can double check that. But you'll see the fourth one down, Cardinal Park, and they actually reference that's the Raleigh Cardinals, which was another name of a baseball team in addition to the Raleigh Capitals. So Leitner Park is one of the ones that we had actually had a person's name, which is obviously one of the former Raleigh mayors. So that's essentially, I don't believe we got any actual names of players. So even though Carl Yashkrimsky played here. So.
And Peace Street Park, it's so simple.
I like it.
Yeah.
That's kind of my favorite.
Well, we thought about that, and we know that Peace University is having their own similar renaming discussions right now, potential.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, really?
Okay.
So,
So
yes,
it
Mr.
could
Peace was
open up
also a
future
former
can of worms. Okay.
Gotcha.
plantation owner, yes.
I thought of that.
Can I ask one quick question? So I think I remember in the survey, there was a question that said, would you prefer it be named after something cultural versus environmental? Was that true, or am I making that question up? Because
I would have to go back and look at that. I
If it
don't,
was, I
don't
was curious what the
exactly
answer
remember that.
was.
I didn't want to. I don't think I
Okay.
wanted to lead anybody on.
Okay.
But I may have. I'll
Okay.
double check.
All right.
But,
I was just curious what
if I
the
did, maybe
answers
that
were to
is
that.
in reference to the naming resolution that we have, which again, geographical, historical, ecological features are encouraged. So.
I kind of like the name Pigeon House Branch Park. And it may surprise you that my uncle on his garage in Birmingham had a pigeon house, which was really nice. And they would come and go, and most people would be surprised to know that. So I like that.
Great. So in terms of our strategy kind of going forward with this, we do have a multi-step process for this. So again, we're here in June, kind of initiating the renaming process. Starting tomorrow or Monday at the latest, we do have a publicinput.com one-page survey ready to go that where we're asking for those 4 names to be ranked in order of preference. So people can pick one or all 4 and rank them however they want to. So, but we feel like we kind of started the process back in February with that original survey question, and we use that as a way to kind of short list of what we have now. Coming back in July, in addition to the concept plan, we'll also review with you all the results of that survey, and then from that have a possible naming recommendation that then can be discussed by you all at that time. And then we will be inviting the public to come and comment at that time as well. And then again, leapfrogging to September, that is when we will request an action on the final naming recommendation, and then we would ask City Council in early October for their final action on the new name.
Could you put those names up again,
Ma'am.
please?
Marcia, did you have a question a moment ago? I may have cut you off.
I just think that the idea of Peace, the Peace Park or Peace Street Park, I mean, even if the university name goes away, the road's going to still be Peace. World always needs more peace.
I agree.
Does anyone have any comments on the names?
Well-
Any thoughts on that?
I'm a little surprised. I mean, I've spent some time last night reading this naming policy, and it doesn't say have a survey. It says the Parks and Recreation, that this board makes a recommendation. So it's helpful to have this survey, but I don't think it should be dispositive just because we stuck our fingers in the wind. And I think, that the reasons and the things we study about this are as important, if not more so. And just wanted to point out the policy.
Okay.
What I would add is that this is the first time in a while that we've had a process like this where we actually had people brought forward ideas and concerns. When we've come as a staff forward before, we usually had one. But this we felt was so important, and we had so many thoughts that came forward during the planning process that we would, and we did our due diligence on names when staff were looking into the Pigeon House history to make sure that which is fair point, that we weren't creating something else we weren't anticipating. That these came forward modeling the concepts of historic or geographic.
Yeah.
That we felt like it would be reasonable in this because of the importance to have that.
Yeah, for me, the issue with capital is that it's very confusing related to the fact that we have our state capital 8 blocks away and not proximate to this. And so even though that's with an O and not the A, and the A is the money sign,
It might cause some confusion.
yeah, I just felt like that was it was confusing. So anyway, I like Pigeon House Branch. But,
I just think it's a
I
little
do want
long.
to throw this out. The other
Yeah.
option could be Gateway Park
yeah,
potentially as well. Like take out the capital from that 4th option. So
That's pretty dope.
Gateway.
It's at the Gateway Center, not that far away, that we have to.
True, there's a Gateway Plaza.
It's not as easy as one thinks at
oh
times.
yeah, right. You step here and you.
Pigeon House is historical, and it's ecological, because it's a branch, and it's, it hits almost 3 out of the 4
Well, it does have a very large watershed for the area. And it is the most impaired creek in our city, which this is helping to remedy.
What's interesting in the research, there was an article dug up from 1948, newspaper article. Back then, they were talking about the issues with this flooding and how rambunctious it is and how much trouble it causes and how much flooding it causes to buildings and such. So even back then, it was a problematic.
Yeah. Somebody's written a book about it.
Yes.
In town. A former N&O.
Scott Hewler.
Scott Hewler has written a book about Pigeon House Branch. I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
but
he traveled underground all the way from the project site all the way up to the, it was referenced in the book, Cameron Village at the time. So
yeah.
Walked all the way up there, apparently poking his head out of the manhole as he went along.
Wow.
So,
He's a braver soul than I.
Since the creek flows north, was there thought to, when you showed the plan, it kind of meanders and then it straightens out and channelizes. Did you guys think about meandering the northern part as well so that it doesn't come out of the park so quickly? And
that's a very good question. Let me go back a little bit. So,
That's a good question.
going back to the original alternative that we had from alternative 3 from last year. You see the blue line, now magenta. That was the stream realignment at that time. So these were developed last spring, essentially, and then presented to the public. During the summer and the fall, our design team went out there and they did some additional environmental remediation. And I can share this with you. You'll be seeing this in the report. Get past this animation I didn't want there. The graphic on the right here, it shows the environmental contamination, essentially plume. And this area right here in the middle, I'll clear it out. That's where the existing old fueling facility is, and that's where a lot of the underground storage tanks are. That's essentially in the higher category, is rated on this scale. And then you see going from there, the colors don't really make any rhyme or reason, but you go from the center outwards and you get to less contamination as you go out. With that, they realize that there's potential to still go through the lower contamination area, but in order to get through this area, you're going to be hitting more of that underground contamination and potential exposure. Not just necessarily to the public after it's opened up to the public, but to people who are actually constructing the site itself. And so the thought process, and also as part of a bigger cost consideration as well too, once we get past the gas station, we realize we probably had to go back to the existing natural channel. Not natural, it's not the natural channel at all, it's actually the unnatural channel, but back to the existing channel. But in the process, going through and improving that channel, making the banks not quite so steep, and improving the bottom of the stream channel as well to make it, put in more riffles and things like that, which are more endemic of a natural stream. So, thanks.
I'd just like to add, as far as the naming, that I think one thing that's nice about the Pigeon House Creek name, other than it's a mouthful, is, that's something we hear often in the city of Raleigh, is that we don't have water. There's no waterfront, and that would really make it special. So it's been something that's been talked about quite a bit, is daylighting this stream and having this as more of a feature. And the remediation, as you just mentioned, and all the environmental impacts of realigning the stream and helping with the contamination of the water, as you said. It seems to me that that's honestly the biggest and most important thing on this site, is the stream. So it makes a lot of sense to name the park after the thing that is really of most concern, of most importance, that gets people most excited.
Yeah.
I had a brief question kind of on that point. Is there a requirement that the word park has to be in the name? I was just wondering if something like Pigeon House Meadow that honors that connection but is slightly less wordy, to Jennifer's point, might be a possibility.
I may not be the one to answer that.
I may not at this moment either. That's something I'd have to check into. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because even Wooten Meadow is Wooten Meadow Park,
Yeah.
right?
I think it's been our tradition to do that, but I have to just evaluate. I'm not sure of a requirement. It's probably been more of a.
I don't think the policy addresses it either.
It does not.
Valley Lake, Lakeland, like those places. Yeah, Laurel.
But I think it's Lakeland Park.
Oh.
But people will call it Pigeon House,
Yeah,
right?
no one calls it Lakeland Park.
What I want to show you here too, just to emphasize, this is something that we could go into more detail at next month's presentation. That's essentially the flooded area of the site, and that area will continue to flood even after we develop it as a park. So it's still.
It's probably flooded right now then.
It could be. It could well be. It does flash pretty quickly, I think. So it will continue. So essentially the site becomes part of Pigeon House during flood events.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
So Gary, if you'll leave that slide there, I mean,
Yep.
this was staff recommendation to do this process. Staff recommendation. So if there is consensus here that one of these is more favorable than others, we don't have to do that process. The policy does not require it. We're proposing it as a staff recommendation based on all the input we had received. If you have a preference here at the table over one, then that is the one that we can move forward. The public comment process is still available if people want have the opportunity to come and speak to that. So that is truly, and that is just what staff had put together as an option.
I personally like the first one, Pigeon House Meadow, and have it as green as possible.
Yeah. I'd make a motion that we do that. I mean, I think we got public input. We solicited that, and we got a lot of names, and then there are very compelling reasons why some of them were ruled out, and so you know, I mean, I think that's according to the policy. It is our role to make a recommendation. I'll make a motion.
You made a motion, okay.
That we adopt the name Pigeon House Meadow.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye. And raise your hand, thanks. Okay, any against? Van?
I would probably drop the Meadow and just call it Pigeon House Park. But I'm okay being on the record as saying that, but also happy with the name.
I mean, that did carry, but we could
It's fine.
also just put forward a couple of the Pigeon House, suggestions and see what the public thinks. Would be
I
another
don't
way
want
to play that out.
I
but-
seriously don't want to complicate it. I'm just thinking about what is it going to translate to? People are going to Pigeon House Park.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But giving that meadow idea is
I get it.
aspirational
I
too.
get it. I totally get it. I do.
Because it sure doesn't look like a meadow now.
That's right.
Maybe we should honor the branch,
That's a great.
the stormwater.
Well, I made my motion.
Yes, you did. And
A
I
little bit of a
voted for it.
Roberts girl
I
here.
voted for it.
Have
And it did carry.
two
We
other
have-
opportunities
Yes.
before you would make by policy a formal recommendation to council in September. So you still-
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right,
Good. All right.
And
Good.
there's still opportunity for public input at the next sessions. We're just taking out that public survey. Is that correct? Okay.
So what we will do is we would put this proposed name of Pigeon House Meadow Park as part of when we post the information. So it would be.
Okay. And then that might sort of fizzle its way out of what's preferred and
Yeah.
like it's shortened. Okay. Great. Okay. Sound good?
Well, it's-
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks for all the background.
Thank you all.
and,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very
Yeah,
thorough.
that's really helpful. All right, next we have an action item to review our work plan. Do we have that by any chance to look at on the screen?
On the screen.
Or I didn't think to ask you guys to have that ready, so. It's essentially the same as you saw at the last meeting, except there was some language that was added about the additional revenue sources at the beginning. And we made an effort to, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Love. Let me see. Okay, this is how it reads now. Explore sources of supplemental funding for parks and greenways, which may include sponsorship packages that may include events and amenities within the Parks and Greenway system. If approved, this would be studied in Parks Committee and then brought to the full Parks Recreation Greenway Advisory Board. So we just sort of finesse that language to add a little bit more sort of information as to what we were trying to get at, but still keeping it within our scope. And okay, everyone good with that? Any questions or comments? I don't believe anything else changed other than maybe some wordsmithing.
I thought we were going to add a line about supporting recruitment for talent and staffing. I didn't see that.
Yeah, it was in the minutes.
Recruitment for staff.
And to that point, I thought we were going to also add the language for conservation, which I also did not see.
Conservation, okay.
That would have been under the Sustainability
Committee?
Wildlife and Urban Trees.
That's the updated one. This is the original one that I made notes on. Feel free to flip around and see what you're looking for.
So Malay, what were you thinking for the conservation portion?
Yeah, I think we had talked about during our last session that we wanted to add conservation as one of the priorities for the work plan, to say how do we prioritize it and how do we make it an objective for us to monitor and kind of drive the recommendations for conservation.
Yeah, I wonder if that maybe just fits into the overall arching
I think
goal of this.
Or the under cultural.
We have this on the second thing under the SWAT committee, continue to monitor the progress and status of the cities. Oh, it's about the biophilic cities that falls, what you're saying falls under the biophilic cities status, and how we will continue to
I think
set our
it's
standards.
implied, is
Yeah.
what you're saying.
The only other place I could see it is under cultural goals. The board takes a more active role in promoting the park system, tree plantings, informed about community centers, financial assistance opportunities. And we could have a bullet that said, and the importance of parks.
Stewardship.
Yeah, parks as conserving natural resources in our community.
Like it.
And sorry, I didn't mean to distract from Lindsay's point on the other part that we needed to add.
Right, I was just going to ask her for more information on that. Okay.
So I just want to, so we're adding a bullet for preserving natural resources in the park system.
And the stewardship of that responsibility.
So read how should that read then, Malay?
That we would be the stewards of providing the recommendations around conservation and continuing to promote the idea of biophilic cities, and whatever actions we take would be driven through that ethos. Sorry, I know that's a long word.
What did you have, Beverly? That was what you said. Can you remember that?
Well,
because it was under the board takes a more active role in promoting the park system, tree plantings. So it should be through tree plantings, informed about community.
maybe
centers,
recognizing.
or it's just
bullet under cultural goals, conserving natural resources and stewardship within the community.
But that's recognizing the important, or what did you have again?
I think that works because it's coming from the main header of the board takes a more active role in promoting. So that's saying
Conservation.
our role is promoting the conservation and stewardship.
And stewardship of natural resources.
Yes.
Correct.
In the community.
That
Yeah.
sounds good.
Conservation and stewardship
And
of natural
stewardship.
resources
Okay.
in the city.
Yes. Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
And then Lindsay, let's get back to yours. Sorry to jump.
I thought we'd developed some kind of line to include regarding supporting staffing, recruitment, and retention, stemming from the discussion around the fact that many of our pools are not open because we do not have lifeguards and fair pay.
If we had, the language was retain and recruit staff, that we encourage the, let's see, I'm looking at the minutes because I saw it when I read them.
I wonder if that's something that could go under Parks Committee, where we have the fees and charges review. I feel like that's where all those
Yeah.
sort of financial sort of things
That seems to
lives.
align well, if Christina
Yeah.
agrees.
Completely, yes.
The PRGAB supports efforts to retain and recruit high-quality employees. That was
There we go.
Okay,
from the minutes.
to retain and recruit. Good, I'm glad you both caught that.
Thank you.
Okay, with those changes, is everyone else, anything else anyone wants to add, or do I hear a motion to approve this with those changes?
So moved.
Great.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Marcia seconded. Let's go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Okay, hearing none, it passes. Thank you.
After I scroll all over.
Thanks. Next, we have the approval of the last meeting's minutes. Those were posted today, if you had a chance to look at them.
Didn't see them.
I did, and I had one question. I think it was at the very end, let's see, or someplace. It just. Here, I'm sorry, I didn't print it and mark it. I've lost it.
If they were right or not. Listen to half the meeting.
I don't find it, so.
Was it a?
It was just, I didn't
a
understand the
grammar
words.
thing? Okay.
Well, it just was a little non sequitur, and I just
okay.
didn't, huh? Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, wasn't a big deal.
With any pending sort of grammatical correction here, does anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any against? Okay, hearing none, it passes. Thank you. All right, next we have, I think, the director's report.
Good evening. I have the director's report in front of you. I am going to touch on a few items on this, though. So we had the council updates. The federal grant restriction that is placed on the deed of John Chapes Memorial Park. Essentially, it's in perpetuity. That since we received funds, that is state park in perpetuity. That was signed off on, so we also allows us to be reimbursed for the $747,000 grant.
That's great.
That we received. So it was a process.
Good.
The micro soccer pitch from the Busey Foundation was donated. It's been accepted. We will be moving that around. That's one that's going to move around. Currently, it's at Millbrook Exchange Park, and it will be moving back downtown again to have another visit in City Plaza area. Important one to note, and we'll spend a little time on this, was that the first action by council for the 2022 Parks Bond, the resolution and notice of intent, was passed. So turn over, there's still other actions that occur. So there will be another vote on June 21st. These are all things that are required by the local government commission when local governments put bonds out on the referendum. There'll be a public hearing on July 5th, and then another formal vote. And after that one, it'll work its way to be placed on the referendum. So that was the first step in that process for the $275 million park bond. And on this past Monday, City Council voted 6-2 to pass the FY23 operating budget. Brief update is our operating budget for FY23 will be $60,780,000 plus a little. That's an increase of $6.24 million from FY22, and the bulk of that is council supporting the new part-time temporary compensation plan, which moves our base position from $8 to $11, and it scales up to there. With regards to lifeguards, that moves them from $9.50 to $13. It's a 40% increase. And in that, we will also receive 3 new full-time positions to support park maintenance and operations at Dorothy Dix Park, giving us 438 full-time authorized positions for PRCR. So that is one that happened just this week. There's a director search update. So there were 80 applicants for the director search. This was essentially directly a quote from the city manager's office. They were very pleased with the level of interest in the position. And the first phase of screening will start mid-June. And they still believe they're on target to reach a new director by the end of the summer.
Wow.
By when?
By the end of summer.
End of summer.
So I also want to take a moment and pass on some information that we actually share with council on summer seasonal operations. We had talked about the concern with seasonal summer staff that is being really faced nationwide. It's no different here than anywhere, but I wanted to update you as where we are. So our Lake Wheeler operations will finally be able to return to 7 days a week starting next Monday. They've been operating on reduced hours. Our rental program for watercraft, where we make that available for people to rent, will only be able to do that at Lake Johnson, and we're looking to start that in early July 8th. Pullen Park is now able to run their both feature attractions, the train and the carousel, simultaneously. We had been at a point we could only run one, stop it, and then run the other. So we're back to be able to running those both today. John Chavis is still at 3 days a week. Again, they're all trying to increase capacity and getting staffing in. Summer camp operations, we have the staffing needed to deliver what we are offering.
That's good.
So that is good. So we're able to meet what we had out there. Where we're feeling the biggest pinch, again, nationally is the same thing, is that our aquatics operations. So our seasonal pools, and then they're so important to the community. We only had the staff to start opening one per weekend. The first one we opened was Longview. Last Saturday, we had 646 folks come that weekend. Staffing is, we've been recruiting aggressively, heavily. We've added more staff in. So this weekend, we will be able to open both Longview and Biltmore. We're opening both. That's where we've been focused. As we get more staffing in, we would then look to add Lake Johnson in to the mix on the weekends. And our goal is the team is looking every week at staffing come in. And we've made some modifications in our onboarding processes to try to speed that up. We're looking every week as we get more staffing on, and we'll focus on weekends and then look to add hours at those sites. We're still operating our year-round pools with some reductions, and we are not accepting, for many years, our pools supported other communities for camps. We're not doing that. We're only focusing on the children that are in our camps, making sure that they have an aquatic experience. But again, we assess every week as we're able to get staffing in. We look to see if we can add time.
Scott,
where we are.
you had mentioned the other day, could you speak to the equity piece of this, of why you're opening the pools you are?
Thank you. So when we knew that we were going to be short on staff, we had to sit down and say, where is that greatest need? And we decided to focus on those areas, those older communities that didn't have pools. And when they were built, they didn't have the opportunity for like an HOA. And that looked to be the Longview and the Biltmore Hills community. So that's where we focus. If we were going to open, even if we were going to only open one a weekend, we would be alternating between those two sites to try to meet that need. That was a targeted discussion of what we were going to open and why. So we're excited that we're going to, looks like we'll be able to open both Longview and Gilmore this weekend. And, you know, we are getting people coming in. Part of the challenge with the lifeguarding aspects, and Ken would be here to do this best because this is in his portfolio, is you have to physically be able to pass the requirements. So we actually pre-screen everyone on, can you swim 300 yards continuously? Can you tread water for 2 minutes with your legs only? And can you go down and do the infamous brick test, and that is to go down and pick up a weight at the bottom of the pool and bring it back up to the deck in a minute 40. Because those are the requirements of the American Red Cross. So we screen people.
Right.
And if they pass that, or if they're really, really close, then we'll get them into our class. And if you agree to work for us, we don't charge you a fee for the course. And we actually outfit you. You don't have to buy your swimwear to be a guard. We provide it to you. It's not the same situation as some of the private sector. So we're trying to find, and we're looking at creative ways to even, you know, how can we, once you complete your certification, can we incentivize you with maybe some type of monetary? And if you work so many hours for us, can we incentivize? We're trying to find any of that piece. Checking in with all our colleagues across the country, how are you doing this as well? Some of the challenges are that we weren't even able to offer lifeguard classes during the pandemic. So there's a big gap, and we were able to train people because we couldn't, we were closed.
That's right.
So that's created some of the tensions in
Yeah, that would be a really good piece to put out. That's sort of one of those blips. I think there are a lot of things people understand, salaries and all that, but that's an interesting thing that might be on social media or someplace.
And also the visas point, I thought was
It was.
interesting,
So
the internationals.
we did not rely on this as much, but many of our colleagues were using international students to come over to be lifeguards, you know, and they would get a visa, but those visas went away. So that was a bigger issue in some of the larger communities, larger cities that had tapped into that resource. So yeah, that was one that's popped up too. It's been a challenge.
Interesting.
So. But I wanted you to be aware. I know there's been a lot. At the last council meeting, Councilmember Buffkin has asked the attorney's office what other options are there to allow access. So we're working with the attorneys to see what else could be done to provide community. But our emphasis has been really focused on community access and recruiting aggressively as we can. We're throwing the net wider than I've ever seen. And to ask you, if you know of anyone, please share on your platforms or mechanisms or however, you can be 15 years old to be certified as American Red Cross lifeguard. So we would love to have someone who is interested and willing. We will pre-screen them to see if they are able. At one of our recent screenings, we had 10, and 6 were able to pass the screening. So, I mean, it is physically demanding, which I'm glad it is if I'm under the water. I'm glad that it is physical demanding that someone can come
Is
get
there
me.
an upper end?
There's not an upper end. I'm everywhere you guess.
You're very athletic.
Yeah, we would be happy to have you, but there is no age end if you can meet that certification process. So please share where you can that we're looking to hire in all positions, but lifeguard's one that's really important to us right now. I think that's kind of I just wanted to update you all on that because it has been a pressure point for us that we're working as hard as we can to try to resolve. The rest of the director's report you have in front of you, Giovanna's pointing out one to me, and to have, thank you Giovanna, upcoming the Nate Mcmillan Gym Dedication Celebration will be on July 22nd. There'll be a formal invitation coming out. We want to make sure that you have that penciled into your calendars now. Thank you. Thus ended.
Is there a time for when the celebration is going to be? Is there a time?
1
1
p.m.
o'clock.
1 o'clock, sorry.
Thank you, Scott. Next, we have our committee reports, starting with Christina, Parks Committee.
Yes, since our last meeting, we had our Honeycut road Welcome to Raleigh series, and it was going to rain, so of course that was fun. But we still had it. We partnered with Bpac. We had the Greenway division of RPD come out, and they let us know there's 2 that are working out of the 6 that have been allotted for that department, and so we're super excited for that. They had Forest Ridge out, which was showing us how to inflate a tire, how to change a tire, and then also from Forest Ridge, they had a balance bike course for children, so that those that couldn't ride a bike could learn on a balance bike. There was the park, and it was fantastic, and we did 2 guided tours. So Bpac went and took people who were there down to show them the Greenway access. The electric bikes definitely helped with that hilly area. It was phenomenal. I have never been on an electric bike before, and I was like, man, I want to ride a bike now because this is awesome. Learning that there were 32 stations was really cool. Bpac was really, really helpful in teaching us about that. So I think it was a great event. They had finished their 2 tours, and somebody had come in and missed. They had signed up but had missed the actual tour, so I did a tour, and I was like, what? This is so cool. So we had a good time. Scott came out, which was really awesome. Got to see him, and it wasn't a huge turnout, again, because of the rain, I think, which didn't end up happening. I mean, I was on the middle of the tour, and then it started raining, but it felt good. So, but it was great. It was great, and then we had a meeting this month, and we talked about this Saturday, we will be at John Chavis Park. We will be there to support the Juneteenth celebration, and we'll be there from 12 to 2. So please come out. We'd love to see anybody from Parks Board. It'd be great to have that, that cooperation and that partnership. So it would be great to see you. After that, we'll take August off, but coming back at the end of August, the beginning of spring, we'll pick back up with Method Days, and then we'll be partnering with Raleigh Youth Council for October, and we're looking at sites right now to do a sort of Halloween dance with them. So we're super excited about that, doing it. We're thinking at Lake Lynn, but we're opening it up for their ideas, since this is going to be a partnership with them. Where do they want to do it? And that was the conversation I will continue to have with Carmen. So I'll keep you updated, and that's it for parks.
Thank you. So you said the Juneteenth celebration at Chavis is on Saturday?
This Saturday, yep.
And is there also something going on at Dick's at the same time?
There
Okay.
are several going on.
Okay, I was a little confused.
whole week
Okay, so it's
that's
all
going on.
on Saturday. I had it on my calendar as Sunday.
There's a
so
karaoke
okay.
event at Carolina Ponds tomorrow night.
Something everywhere.
So-
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Lindsay, I don't imagine you have a report. Okay, thank you. Greenway Committee, Beverly?
We met this past Monday, and we got an update on projects that are completed, projects that are in design, and projects that are upcoming. And to save me recounting that, the PowerPoint has been emailed to all of you. And so you can see the pictures, and it'll have the maps and show you exactly where the work was done, some photographs of it. And so it was very interesting conversation, and lots of projects. And some of these are from the old last bond, and some of them are upcoming, and some of them will be finished this fall, and some will be finished in another year or two, because they're really big projects, like the Crabtree West, which will connect where Crabtree Creek Greenway ends now at Oak Park neighborhood, and it'll connect all the way over to Umstead Park. And then that will be a continuous piece from Umstead Park to the Neuse River Trail. Oh, well, we will send it to all of you because I think everybody would enjoy seeing that. So,
Quick question for you.
sure. Oh, the Allegheny, yes, we actually, I made a note about that, and that is still in the hands of the enforcement people in the development arena, but they have gotten another notice. This is the fence encroachment on the Greenway and it is going to the legal department very shortly, with a notice of them that there are a lot of people in the community who are concerned about this and that they need to take action. So, yes, staff was informed of the concern that is in the community, and the process is moving forward.
That sounds great.
Thank you, Beverly. And do take a look at that PowerPoint when we send it out.
Yeah,
Because it's
yeah.
really interesting
It's
to see all
really-
the projects that are going on
I
or
love that.
completing or about to happen. Yeah. Next, Marcia, Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees Committee.
Yeah, we did not meet last month,
Oh,
and
that's right.
but we have changed our meeting date. The next meeting will be Wednesday, 6th of July, 4:30, in this room, right? So we welcome anybody that's interested in sustainability and wildlife and urban trees. Come join us.
Great, thank you. Devereaux Meadow Park, we just had a report on this, but the one reason we need this item on here is we are looking for another liaison for this committee from the board to be on the Citizen Planning Committee. Two of the members that were previously on this committee have rolled off their times on the board, wherever it was Brad and Charlie. For now, I've been added on. But if anyone has any particular interest and would like to be the representative from the board, just let us know.
To Pigeon Branch. We got to start changing
Start
our
changing the name.
our language.
It's not official yet.
No, yeah, but we got to do it sooner rather than
So
later.
you don't have to say right now, but if you could let me and Giovanna know, that would be wonderful.
What kind of time commitment is that normally like?
It's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's pretty minimal.
I have been on that stakeholder group, and it is very, I will say, confusing because I don't know when. There's not a consistent time, and that's led to me being not as good of a representative because I never know when we meet, and it's a little frustrating. It's a little frustrating.
It's hard to plan.
It's hard to plan.
Yeah.
It's very hard to plan.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think the idea is just that if they have any public meetings or anything going on, that we would attend that as a representative of the board. So, and that might be why it's confusing, because there haven't been a whole lot of public meetings, and they've mostly been virtual.
Right. I mean, at first they did have stakeholder meetings where it wasn't public, and that was where I met with the other two, and we would go. But then they kind of just stopped, and there was no message, and then I forget about it because I forget that I'm on that. And then we have a meeting, and they're like, "Hey, what's the update?" And I'm like, "What? Oh, gracious, we haven't had a meeting." And then there'll be a community meeting that I'll find out about. I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't show up to that." So it's a little bit. It's a little bit
It
rough.
sounds like we
It's been
need
rough.
to get that message out. That we could
It's been a
use
little
some
rough.
more clear communication. Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Carol, Arts Commission.
The Arts Commission, the most recent Arts
Mike.
Commission. Oh, thank you. The most recent Arts Commission report was provided to you a month ago when we met as the board. There has not been another Arts Commission meeting since then. There will be one next week. So if anyone wants to stay informed about it, they need to refer to the previous notes that were kindly provided to me by the executive staff person, Sarah Powers, because I was unable to attend that meeting. And so that's it for the Arts Commission. I will have another report. Do we meet in July? Okay, at the July meeting.
Very good, thank you. Christina, do you have a report for Bpac?
I do. I was at their meeting this past Monday. They moved it in order to celebrate Juneteenth. They moved it back to this Monday, and we met at Union Station. And there were some presentations on some roadway changes on specific streets, and it was kind of muddled and I thought I took notes, but I did not. So I will reach back out and get that clarification for you. It was a great meeting, and they wanted to learn more about greenways. So all of that. So yes, we will get that communication back up and running, but.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
City of Raleigh Historic Cemeteries Commission. We have a new staff liaison. Hello, Charles.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Interim Director Scott Payne. I am Charles Craig, Park Superintendent. I'm pleased to announce that the board is in good standing and we are meeting regularly. The last meeting was held in person on May 26 at 5:30 p.m., located at the Tucker House. During that meeting, nominations for officers was submitted, accepted, and passed. For chair, it will be Caleb Smith, and for vice chair, it will be Amy Fix. The annual report and work plan was also reviewed, and motion was passed and accepted. The next meeting will be held on Thursday, July 28th at 5:30 p.m. at the Tucker House in person. This concludes my staff report. Are there any questions?
Any questions? No.
Thank
I
you.
do have a question. How
Yes.
many people are on your board?
7.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. Okay. Dick's Leadership Committee, I don't have a report from the last meeting. There were 2 meetings in May, and I missed the last one. I would love to see notes from that. I don't think, they're not up online yet, because that should have been a fairly interesting one. And then the one before that in May was largely about the Plaza and Play project that is in construction documents and getting closer to starting construction. And the main purpose of the discussion was talking about trying to keep things in budget. And then, of course, we had our obligatory discussion about parking and how much parking is the right amount of parking, and lots of disagreement about that. So,
Everybody should ride bikes there, e-bikes.
right. We talked about
Not everybody
shuttles.
can do that.
We talked about the R line, which apparently is not running anymore, which I didn't realize. And parking garages. So I'll, if I can find more notes, I'll send that out to everyone. Historic Resources and Museum Advisory Board, I do not have a report for that either. And then chair report. I was just going to highlight the Juneteenth activities and celebrations that are going on this weekend, so please take a look at that online and try to get out for as many as you can. Did you want to add something?
I would ask for a special point of preference when you're completed with that.
Sure.
Yeah.
The retreat that we've talked about having as a board is at this point going to be sometime in the fall. We're looking to do it after a new director is put into place. So that's probably September, October timeframe. And regarding the director search that Scott mentioned, Beverly and I have been invited to attend some of those interviews that are happening. So we'll certainly enjoy doing that and see how that goes, that process. I assume it will be fairly confidential, but we'll report what we can. That is all I have. Go ahead, Scott.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I missed my own handwriting here, which is not unusual nowadays. This is back to information on the bond as it's moving forward through the process for approval. The beginning of formation of an advocacy group. Now, this is done by the chamber. They put together the advocacy group. But it's an opportunity. If we have members, maybe 3 members of the board that would like to be considered to be on that advocacy group. And the advocacy group does a lot of the speakers bureau. So if we're following the playbook, I'll call, from prior bonds, there's a lot of speaker engagement where you go to Rotary, associated different groups, homeowners associations, and the advocates encourage people to vote for the bond. You're supported by staff who go and talk about this is what's in the bond. Staff cannot advocate or request people. But we go through, here's the projects, and here's what's included in the projects, and then we sit down. And then the advocate stands up and talks about the value and encourages people. It's can be very busy, very intense. Everybody will be involved, but in some way, shape, or form. But the advocates group, the members of the advocacy group, are probably the most heavily involved in that with a lot of the speaking engagements. So if you are interested in that, we would share those names forward, and the chamber then essentially symbols that group. So I apologize, I didn't mention that earlier, and I was talking about the next step of the bond, but I didn't want to miss it because it is.
Thank you. That's very important.
It's a big lift. This is, to my knowledge, Stephen can confirm, this is the largest general obligation bond for parks in the state ever.
That's what's been reported, yeah.
Yeah. So it is a very big piece.
That's great.
Right.
So,
So
yeah, I would
what is the
encourage you to
time
have-
frame for that? So, because the election is in November, right? So I assume it would be September, October, or is it
It has
July?
been, and Stephen can support
August.
here, usually it begins in earnest in September, very aggressive in October. Often a lot of the groups that we go speak to take the summer off, right? So they're coming back in. So there's a lot of scheduling and getting on people's schedules to come speak. So aggressively, I would say the actual speaker side of it, Stephen, that would be September, and really
Yeah.
busy October.
They'll begin notifications within a week, so it's happening pretty quick. And I was told today it's likely the last week of August is when they will launch their media. You don't want to do it too early, and it's usually about 60 days out, 60 to 75 days out, where they'll aggressively do the campaigning.
Okay, great. Thank you.
The Chamber's been doing this for a number of years, so they have a formula that they really believe in, and
Yeah, there'll be full web, social media, TV, and led by a professional consulting firm. And you all will work together with probably 40 people, maybe 50.
The 40 or 50 people are also advocates, is that?
That's correct. So from all cross sections of the city, geography, age, race, all different areas, business leaders,
So the
neighborhood
chamber
leaders.
has found these folks that are supporters of the bond that will
Yes,
come out?
they have reached out through the city council, some boards, then we're coming to you, and then through Scott and I and say, we want a good list of names of people who are going to be able to step forward. And
we reach out to our staff, that are on the ground, and there may be, who's an advocate
Volunteers
for Method, community center, historic community. Is there someone that we think, and staff will give us a name, and then we'll provide those names, and they try to blend that group. But even if you're not a member of that advocacy team, which is going to be busy, you will have yard signs we'll provide you. You have the opportunity, we can provide you information if you're meeting with your social groups to talk about that. We can provide that content on what's in the bond that you can share. This will really be an all hands on deck kind of effort because there will be 3 bonds currently, we believe, fully on the referendum at the same time. The school system, Wake County Community College, Wake Tech,
Right. Yeah.
and the Parks Bond.
I don't want to serve on that group, but I'd
Was
like
gonna
to
sign you
get, I would like to get information because of the senior club I'm involved with, my church and Sunday school class that I teach, and then my residents, 55 plus at Centennial. I'll be happy to share with them.
So what we will probably do, if there are 3 folks that want to step forward now and say yes, we'll come back with what that information approach will be and have contact. What information do you need, and we can provide that to you. The yard sign, same kind of thing. Be happy to.
Is there anyone that would like to go ahead and say they're interested in this, or do you want to think about it? When do you need these names? You said it's going out right away, right?
Yeah, I told Scott at 4:45 today. So we found out that early. Basically, the council is going to make the second vote, which is really key. It says file the application with the local government commission. Then it becomes very real. So they want a lot of infrastructure goes into place from developing the campaign and the website, and they'll do that in July. So in August, the committee will get trained. They'll use your social networks like Dr. Love has shared. So we would hope tonight, but if not, I would say the latest would be Monday.
Okay.
Well, I've done it for the school bond, so
I've done it for the Parks bond in the past, and it can be really interesting to go to the various civic groups and talk with folks.
So are you volunteering, Marcia?
I don't know. I'm thinking about it. It's something I can do, but I've got something other
Right.
weighing on.
So I heard Beverly. I think you volunteered.
I think I volunteered.
Okay. I'll volunteer. I was just waiting for others to jump forward, both feet.
I'll do it, but with the caveat that late August might be bad because my 5-year-old's starting kindergarten. So those first couple weeks, I'm gonna get
We'll
through
bring
that,
you the box of tissues.
It's all based on availability. Even if you volunteer, you can be a conduit of
You'll be good, Lex.
sending information out and so forth. So it doesn't always have to be physically present. If you're willing to send things out to your peers, that's really key.
Absolutely.
Oh, God, yeah.
In that case.
Yeah, I think in that case, then I can support that. I think my problem is the physical availability during that time. And so whatever I can do to open network and wherever I could be present, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, Scott it was very important. If we get 2 or 3 that can do the in-person, that's great, even if it's only 2. When we met with the consultants today, they said they want the entire board to be involved, but they only need 1 or 2, maximum 3 for the physical presence. The rest is you sharing out information and giving out hundreds of yard signs. Yeah.
Handing out postcards at parks. And, yep. Okay.
I'll do that.
I can be the pinch hitter for our venerable chair and co-chair.
Thank you. Great. All right.
Thank you. Sorry,
Good conversation.
I almost missed that, but I caught it, Steve.
We've come to the end of the meeting. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to share or report out, Lindsay?
Yes, next Wednesday, there's a public open house for the Mine Creek Trail Project. This open house will be held at Sertoma Arts Center on June 22nd to present preliminary design plans for Mine Creek Trail Improvement Project. Improvements are being proposed for a portion of the Mine Creek Trail in partnership with Raleigh Water Sewer Improvements. And this is actually near where I live, so, I won't go into detail on it now, but I would encourage, if you have the time and availability, to come. It sounds like something that I would encourage you to come listen to. There are many community members who will be coming to share their concerns about the impact of it.
Yes, and that will actually be in the presentation from the Greenways Committee. Thank you for bringing it up. I do plan to be there, and in attendance. I have that on my calendar too. It's a much needed rerouting of the thing, but there are also a lot of concerns, and the staff has really got some ideas to share on how to mitigate some of those concerns, fencing and things like that. So
I live in that neighborhood.
Is the meeting in Sertoma?
It's at Sertoma Arts Center, yes, yeah.
Thanks, Lindsay. Christina? We can just kind of go down. Did you have anything, Malay? Okay.
No, I'm good, thanks.
I was just, Scott, wanting to know, I know we've been talking about the part-time salary, those part-time positions, and that the department is struggling to fill those. How are you guys doing on full-time? I know we've just lost Sally. I just got the email we lost Owen tomorrow. What are you, coming from this, how are you guys doing for full-time?
So we're in a much better position now than we were in early FY22 when all of our positions were frozen, and we had to request them to be released because that was a budget balancing mechanism with the unknown about the pandemic as we were coming out. That's been released, so as we're getting notice, we're automatic, to be fair, we're also evaluating all of those positions, and is that position still the highest and best use for our needs? So we do that work. And if it is, then we will post it. We are getting pretty good response for full-time for people applying. So we're not seeing the same kind of situation that we're seeing not being able to find people into part-time. We're getting positions. Some are challenging because they're specialty. You know, finding someone who's a GIS specialist, and that's a very competitive market space. But for the majority of the vacancies that we're getting, that we're posting, we are getting candidates in, and we're seeing some opportunity. It's a good thing, but it's got a back end where we're seeing internal promotion. So if someone's moving up, but that creates a vacancy on the back end that we have to fill. But we are seeing a good response to our full-time positions.
Thank you.
Marcia, anything?
I don't think so.
Okay, thanks. Dr. Love?
I have a question. Ken wasn't here tonight and Sally is gone. I think Sally was the person who got the ambassadors for the event like we're having at Chavis this coming weekend. So is there someone that's going to be sure the ambassadors are there?
So our ambassador program is actually run by our marketing team.
Oh, okay.
So they're the one that they actually work for the marketing team. So you can contact me. You can continue to contact Ken if there's an interest in having an ambassador come to a program. And we work with our marketing team, and they will sign them up and get them scheduled.
I guess I need to ask Christina, is that the way it goes?
Yeah, her name is Linda, the one that's been handling the ambassador program. And yes, they will be there, and they're setting up tables, and they've been amazing at all the events. So no, we love them.
Good.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. Beverly?
No?
Chris?
Nope.
Okay. Lex, nothing? Okay. No. Carol? Anything you want to share? Or,
And Dr. Love and Scott Pavement to the Black Families event at the, was it?
Sanford Road.
Oh.
That Rashawn.
Yes, Rashawn's event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Late.
I had, as usual, I have more than one thing going on. So I had to go over there that morning, and then I had to be someplace else later. So Scott and I were the early birds.
Well, I had a bang up time when I was there.
You play kickball?
I don't play kickball with my foot. When it's operated on a foot. If I wait until I'm healed, then I'll give them
Very good. All right. Well, hearing nothing else, declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone.